I'm Amelie and welcome once again to my channel. Today I'm going to be watching episodes 9 and 10 of Dao Zu Shi, and we are so close to the end. Only 2 more episodes, well, this one's today and 2 more episodes, and then it's going to be over, and I don't think I'm ready. I'm not ready. Like, I wasn't ready to say goodbye to this story when I finished the Untamed. I'm finishing this. I'm not ready, and I know I'm continuing with reading the novel as well, but that is going slow. I promise I'm going to try to, accelerate things a little bit. But I don't know. I'm not ready to finish this. And I know that I also have that version that is like I don't know what it's called. The other day I said the same thing in the video for the novel, and what is it called? Like chibi, something like that. There is a version that is like animated, but it's more like cute. I know that I also have that version, and I'm going to be reacting to that as well, but I feel like I'm running out of things to watch related to this story, so I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe, I don't know, rewatching the whole of the Untamed. Well, I have rewatched it a few times, but it's not the same. So I am excited, but also a little bit sad that it's over, because also I'm really enjoying this 3rd season, and I have the feeling that I'm really going to enjoy today's episodes, because unless I'm mistaken, I have the feeling that in today's episodes we are going to be dealing with the 2nd Burial Mound siege, I think. I don't know if it's called like that. I don't know where I got that it's called like that. But what I mean is all of the sect leaders going to burial mounds thinking that Wei Wuxian is up to no good, and there's a lot of puppets there and all of that. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm really excited to watch that, because in the Untamed, I love that part. I love just Wei Wuxian talking to these sect leaders, just showing them what big idiots they are. I loved it. And also it had this thing about, when someone has been investigating and they're trying to solve things, Wei Wuxian just working and showing to everybody how smart he is and how capable he is, and just, things turning for him. I love it. I love seeing Lan Wangji standing with Wei Wuxian. Incredible. So I'm really looking forward to watching this. Okay, so before we start with the reaction, I have something to talk about. For the past few weeks, I've been receiving some asks on Tumblr asking me about the whole situation with the translation of Dao Zu Shi for the Seven Seas books. And for a while, I didn't want to give my opinion on this, because I haven't read the translation, or at least I haven't read it completely. So for a while, I decided to, keep myself out of it. I don't know. That's it. But then I started to read a lot about this translation. There's a lot of threads listing all of the mistakes, and also read a lot of people's opinions, whether are criticisms, but also support of this. And, I tried to read as much as I could. And I do have an opinion. So despite what I said like 15 seconds ago, I do have an opinion, and I am going to offer it. This opinion you have to take with a grain of salt. As I said before, I haven't read the novel. Not the novel. I haven't read the novel either, for the matter. I've just started. I haven't read the translation. However, I do feel like I know enough to have my opinion on certain aspects of it. And especially because of my work and what I know about this business, I feel like I can add something to this discussion. If I was going to repeat the same opinions as I've seen, I wouldn't bother. But I feel like I can, offer my experience in this business and use that as my opinion. So that's why I am doing it. But again, take it with a grain of salt. I haven't read the complete translation. However, I do understand if somebody doesn't want to stay and listen to me talk or rant. No, it's not going to be a rant. I'm going to try to be as calm as possible. It may get a little bit ranty at some parts, but I think it's probably not going to be the parts that you think about. However, I fully understand if somebody doesn't want to hear me speak about this, so I'm going to put the time in which the reaction starts for anybody who wants to skip this completely. I'm going to try to keep it short, but who knows? I mean, I thought maybe 10 minutes, but at this stage, who knows what's going to happen? I have my notes and I'm following them, so I don't, just start talking about anything else, but it may happen. So there we are. So for those who want to leave, I'm going to give you 1 second to leave, and then I'm going to start talking about this. Okay, so that's it. Now that those guys left, let's just start with this, my opinion on the whole mess that is this issue. And for those who, I don't know, don't never heard me talk about this before, I am a translator. I have complained many times about subtitles in this channel, and I have a lot of things to say about it. However, I don't actually do subtitles. I don't work with subtitles. It's just an aspect of translation that I don't like. I have done them in the past. I have mostly done subtitles for documentaries or things like that. I have done 2 films, but they were independent films. And that's it. This was when I was just starting. I do not like it. I did not enjoy the experience. I do not like doing subtitles. So it's not something that I do a lot at all nowadays. However, what I do a lot is novels. About, I would say, half of my work is translating novels. Obviously, I translate from English to Spanish, and I translate here in Argentina for Latin America mostly. So again, take with a grain of salt what I'm going to say. I think translation, especially translation when it comes to, how it works, it changes region to region. It's different here in Latin America. I'm sure it's different in Europe, in Asia. It's going to be, the market is different, the way business is conducted is different. So again, take this with a grain of salt. Although I assume that there's going to be things that are going to be similar. So, translated novels. What can I say about this? I have been translating novels for a very long time, for several years now. And I have worked for big publishing companies as well as independent companies. I have worked for translating what you would consider more like classic literature, as well as not classical literature, more like things more similar to 50 Shades of Grey. I actually have translated a lot of, can you even call it romantic literature? Romance literature? No, I don't think so. Erotic literature, I guess. That sort of things. I haven't enjoyed translating many of those things, but there we go. I had to get paid at some point. So that is my experience on this. So I feel I can speak about this. Not that somebody who doesn't have the experience can speak. I think everybody can have its opinion. But I definitely have a perspective on this. Let's just say it like that. And let me preface this by saying translations have mistakes. It happens. A translator is not a machine. It actually is very far from a machine, because machines are very far from perfect. They are even less perfect than people when it comes to translation. But people are also fallible. They make mistakes. They made a lot of mistakes. There are actually even a lot of published translations that have a lot of mistakes. I remember the translations to Spanish of Agatha Christie's work. They are atrocious. They are mistakes that you don't even have to read the original. You can just read the translation and know what the translation was, because everything was it was translated so directly, and it's just awful. I read all of them, but it was just awful. Mistakes happen. They're inevitable. So in that sense, I understand when people say, calm down. Mistakes happen. They are not a big issue. However, there are mistakes and mistakes. And what do we call a serious mistake when it comes to translation? In that case, we call a serious mistake when the translation somehow alters what is being said in the original. And that is not necessarily what is explicitly said, but also it can change what is suggested or what is implied. The translation has to consider all of this, when you choose words, when you choose how to phrase things, you have to consider not only the specifically what you're being said, but also what you're implying. So sometimes translations fails not only in the explicit aspect of translation, but also in what you're implying by it. I remember when I was studying literature, when I was doing my first degree, before I did translation, and actually the professor I'm going to talk about is the one who convinced me to go into translation. I was taking a class in American literature, and we have this professor who was absolutely brilliant. The guy had 90 years old. He could barely move, but he was so brilliant. And he had done some of the best translations to classic literature, at least here in Argentina. He was famous for it. And you could mention any work written in English, and he would tell you which is the best translation that you could use. That's how brilliant he was. He had read everything. He had a lot of opinions about it, and absolutely brilliant. So we're talking about with this professor, and one of my classmates had an edition of the Henry James work that we were dealing with. I'm not going to mention which one because I'm going to somehow spoil the ending a little bit. And the professor said, do not use that translation. And when asked why, he said that translation changed the ending of the story. This was a story that had an open ending. The main character finishes and has two choices, and that's how it ends. We never know which choice they make. That is how the story ends. And in the Spanish version of this, they managed to imply that the character, although he doesn't or she doesn't act to choose one of these options, that he's considering one over the other. That is the implication that the ending does. That's why that is a very serious mistake, because it not only changed the way you see the story, but you also change the way you see the character. It's a huge mistake. And this was a published version on a very important publishing house. So what I'm trying to say is mistakes happen. Even those serious mistakes happen. So what I'm saying now doesn't mean that we don't have the right to complain or say anything, but just that it's something about the nature of translating that we have to accept, that there isn't 100% correct translation of anything. That being said, there are mistakes that are more serious than others. The one that I mentioned was a pretty big mistake. And again, we consider these pretty big mistakes when the meaning is changed. But there are other mistakes that we can see, or at least issues that readers may have with the translation. For example, there are spelling mistakes. Spelling mistakes are not translation mistakes. Obviously, they're just mistake using the language. This, to me, is not a very serious mistake. However, it's a mistake that definitely shows lack of professionalism. First of all, because they're spell checkers nowadays. Nowadays, they're very powerful spell checkers. There's versions of spell checkers that you can pay that were excellent, and you can pay them specifically for the language you're using. I paid 2, one in English, one in Spanish, and that's what I used to work. Second, it shows that maybe the editing aspect of what is being translated didn't work very well, because again, spelling mistakes are pretty easy to spot. And when they're not, there's spell checkers to deal with. Obviously, when it comes to this type of writing, it's more difficult because you have a lot of terms that the spell checker is not going to have. But you can add them. You can add, and then it's going to correct based on the words that you have added. So, for example, if you have a name that is spelled in a particular way, you can add that name, and whenever you spell it incorrectly, then it's going to mark it as incorrect. So, to me, again, spelling mistakes are not a big issue unless you spell a mistake so badly that you confuse it by the name or another character or something like that. This is not what happened here, but rarely spelling mistakes play a huge role in the story. They're just distracting, and again, they show poor proof editing, I guess. So, I don't know. Already when I see spelling mistakes or things like that, I I start to pay attention to what I'm reading. Let's just put it like that. There are other mistakes, like, for example, mistranslations, when you translate something incorrectly or you said differently to what is being said. There are, for example, I don't, is this a translation mistake? I guess it could be. If you omit lines of what you're writing, that is also a pretty big issue. It's going to depend on the line, as I'm going to say a little bit later when I talk specifically of this translation. But omitting lines, omitting paragraphs, that is also going to be a mistake that you may find that is going to be serious, depending on the line. There's something else that I'm going to be talking about that are not mistakes, or at least technically they aren't. They are, let's call them choices. Choices that the translation has made that maybe you don't agree with. We can't call these mistakes, because a mistake is something that the translator would do without noticing. Like they don't do them on purpose. They just made a mistake and they don't notice. I don't think choices are, especially when they are done knowingly, when you knowingly do something, that is just a choice you make, and you may agree or disagree. We'll see some of the choices that I've seen here that I may agree or disagree. And again, they may be correct or incorrect. I don't know. But they're definitely choices that are made that you may take issue with. So that is another aspect that I'm going to talk about. But I would say that the most important thing that I'm going to focus are things that change the way the story is perceived, the characters are perceived, and things like that. So let's talk about what happened. So essentially, after many people read the translation for this novel, or at least the first part of this translation, they started to find a lot of mistakes or a lot of issues. Let's call them issues. And I was surprised because for what I understood of the way this novel had been marketed, this had been marketed as opposed to the fan translations who had, mistakes. They had some issues. This one was supposed to be done professionally. So it was supposed to be an edition that was a lot more professional to what we had available. And it makes sense, because otherwise, why would you buy it if there's already something else available? Although I think they are no longer available, the other versions, that the other translations. I'm not sure about that. But again, if it's not better, why would you buy it if it's not marketed that way? So I was surprised when I started to see all those issues that people had. And a lot of people started to look for someone to blame. And I think that's understandable. I don't know if I agree with it, but that's understandable, because you would think, why? Why are these problems happening? So let's consider who could be responsible for this. And let's start talking about the translator. The translator's name is Suika. I believe she's a she, I think, but please correct me if I'm wrong. So let me just say this. I didn't read the translation, but I did read all of the pages that were available when they were showing the issues people found. And I'm not crazy about the translator. Not the translator, I don't know her. I'm not crazy about the translation. To me, it sounds a little bit awkward. I don't know anything about the translators, but to me, it seems a little bit like someone who maybe is not a native speaker of English. And I don't know. Again, I don't know anything about her. Maybe she is. It's just the way she writes that, and that's fair enough. But I've seen that a lot because I also do a lot of proofreading, surprisingly enough. And I've seen that sort of writing from people who are trying to translate to a language that is not their native language. And listen, and people are going to say, what's that important? If she knows the language, she's bilingual. That's all fine and good. But you can know very well a language, but you still lack the ability that a native has to be natural with it. I have been studying English I started when I was 6 and I'm over 30 now. So over 30 years I've been studying English. I still uncomfortable translating to English. I don't like it. And I know that I'm not very good at it because I'm not as natural as I am with Spanish, because Spanish is my native language. It's the one that I can write more comfortably in, and I can understand more fully, and I can be more natural with it. That is the thing. There are a lot of translators who translate to different languages than their native. That is true. But usually it takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of experience to do it in a way that it's fine. The truth is that it's a lot more difficult to translate to a different language that is not your own. So that is the impression that I have. And again, maybe I'm completely wrong and that is just, just how she writes, and then I'm so sorry. But I do feel like there is a certain awkwardness with the translation. And that is all I can say. Again, I haven't read the whole thing, but that is as much as I can say. And to me, I'm not mentioning this awkwardness just because I feel like it. And this is not an attack on the translator. I think most people would probably be very fine reading this. It's not terrible. It reads fine. I think it could be smoother. But again, if you have to read this, definitely, to me, it reads a little bit better than the Exiled Rebels translation. But to me, what this shows is maybe that this is a translator that doesn't have a lot of experience. And I know she has done fun translations before. This is not the same. It's not the same when you have, a schedule and you have pressure and you have a lot more things to compare. And also, again, translating for a company, it's a lot of pressure when you write to write the correct thing. It's very different than doing a fun translation. And I feel definitely shows, not only in the translation itself, but I feel that in the way she has behaved, for what I've seen in the tweet that she has done, because of all the complaints, I feel that it definitely shows that she has a lot of experience working in the business. And again, everybody starts somewhere. So in this case, my particular opinion is that I won't blame the translation. But let's talk about the mistakes for a little bit, specifically the mistakes that we have here. So far, I've read of two issues that they bother me. And these are issues that I do feel they change a little bit the way, you see the characters, the way you see the story. So I would say that, as far as I'm concerned, the two issues that I found in people had complained the most, one of them is an omitted paragraph about Wei Wuxian talking how at the beginning he thought Shang Chen was going to be by his side and Lang Wangji was going to be against him, and he didn't expect that it was going to be the opposite. This is a pretty important part. This is a pretty important line. It's not, if the translator had omitted something like, I don't know, Wei Wuxian saw the mountain and it was raining. I don't know. I don't remember any particular line, because if you meet one of those lines, it's not memorable. It's just, a description or something like that. It's probably not going to be a huge issue for this story. If you don't say that, or if you don't describe something very particularly, if you omit a line like that, it's still an omission, but it's not going to affect the way you see the story. It's not such a big deal. But that particular line is a huge line, and I'm going by the Untamed because I haven't reached that part of the novel, although I think it's probably the next part that I'm going to read, but I haven't reached it yet. But based on the novel, on the Untamed, that has the same line, that is a huge line, because on the one hand, it presents Wei Wuxian's belief that in the past Lang Wangji was his enemy, which he wasn't, but that is his perspective. And also the fact that he says he didn't expect Lang Wangji to be by his side and Shang Chen opposite him. It shows also his change with relationship in terms of Chang Cheng. That is a huge line in terms of of how Wei Wuxian perceives his role in the story in terms of these characters. Again, a huge line. So again, I think this was an accident. There are some very interesting, let's say, theories about why certain things were omitted or changed. I personally don't believe them. I'm going to believe that it was just a mistake. Sometimes you can omit lines. No, you can omit lines. You shouldn't omit lines. Sometimes it happens. That's what I mean to say. But I believe that in that case, that is a pretty serious line to omit. It can happen, but it's a pretty serious one. The other one that I've seen mentioned is the fact that Suika uses Lang Wangji instead of Lang Shan. And I feel that is a pretty big change when it comes to Wei Wuxian, because again, we feel that Wei Wuxian says that, especially at the beginning, he says that, you know, Lang Wangji is his enemy and he has this, antagonistic relationship with him. But the fact that he calls him by his first name a lot of the time shows that he actually is close to him, despite the fact that maybe he doesn't realize. So he changing that, that is what I would call a choice. The translator made a choice to translate, to change that. I don't know if it's a very happy choice, but it's a choice they made. It's not a choice that I would have made. I would say that I will keep Lang Shan because I don't see the justification to change it. But then again, it's a choice. Although I would say that I don't know if it's a choice from the translator or from the editor of the proofreader. Well, I don't know if the proofreader wouldn't change it. But if the editor, because in her tweet, Suika said that her version was very different to the version that was published, that there were a lot of changes. So at this stage, we don't know if it was her choice or it was the editor's choice. Those are the mistakes, or those are the issues that I find the more, worrying, because I feel like those are pretty important things to change. Obviously, there are some others that there is a mistranslation of a line and things like that, which, again, to me, it's not good, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't change the story. So, I don't know. Now, as I mentioned, Suika did make a comment on Twitter, and she said essentially that she didn't have enough time to do it. That from all the novels that were published, this one in particular was the only one who was translated from scratch, and that she didn't have enough time to do it. And to me, this is not something that reflects bad on her, but reflects bad on, the publishing house. Like, why did they give her so little time to do it, knowingly that is probably not enough? But also, as a translator, one of the things that because, and again, I don't know how they do it in other countries, but at least, and even though I don't know in Latin America, but here in Argentina, when you go to work for a place, or when you go into an interview, or when somebody is looking for a translator, and I mean a big company, not just random people, a lot of the time what they're going to ask is how many words you can translate per day, or like what is your rate of words in certain amount of time. And this is important because it helps you calculate how long a project will take you, or they just tell you, this is the project, this is the amount of words, this is the topic, how long do you think it's going to take you to translate? And when you have experience translating and you have been translating for a while, you can pretty much calculate. I'm not going to say you can calculate to the day, but you can more or less calculate that certain topic is more difficult, so it's going to take you longer. If you read a sample of it and you realize that the writing is a little bit convoluted, so it's also maybe going to take you a while. Or if you read and it's very simple and it's a topic that then it's going to take you a lot less time. And usually this time it also takes into account that as you translate, you correct. It's not like you just translate and that's it. This is what I translated. You go back and pretty much check what you translate. Obviously, sometimes it's difficult because when the translation is so fresh into your mind, it's sometimes difficult to see mistakes. And that for some reason happened. You have to let go of it for a few days, and which is not always possible. But you do take into account that you will have to do some kind of proofreading of this, and you're going to have to check it. So you have some idea of how long it's going to take you, especially if you're doing other jobs. If you're doing this and also you're at the same time doing that, you take everything into account when you accept the job. And it's also your responsibility to say, no, that time is not going to be enough. I'm going to need more time. So I don't know if maybe she asked for more time and they didn't give it to her, or maybe she just didn't ask thinking that she could do it. But again, to me, that talks more about inexperience rather than, a problem. My hope for the translator is that she could get enough feedback and she could learn enough how to do it, so in the future she can be better. Again, everybody starts somehow, somewhere, and I'm sure my first translation was terrible, and probably I'll be ashamed of it. So I think it happens, and I don't think she should be ashamed. I think it's all in all, it's fine. It's okay. I'll just put it, it's an okay translation. So my hope is that, and usually publishing houses, especially if you're somebody who's going to continue working for them, they give you a lot of feedback about your work, telling you, maybe avoid this, or maybe you should do this, or be careful with this because you tend to translate it in this way, or things like that. You receive a lot of feedback usually, or if they don't give it to you, you can ask for it. So that helps you a lot in the process of learning, because again, the thing about experience is that you have to start somehow. Like before I started working as a translation professionally, I used to do a lot of voluntary work and things like that. And yeah, sure, I was translating, but it wasn't the same. When I had to do it for money, when I had to do it professionally, it completely changed. And the only way I learned was by doing it. So I think the problem with the situation is the fact that, this is something that a lot of people have been expecting for a very long time, that so many people are so focused on this. And also the problem that we already have sort of translations and people know them very well. People know the story very well. So they find mistakes very easily. I think that if this was another novel and nobody had read the original, or even if they had, they probably would have read and it's fine. I don't think that is that bad. I do think that those mistakes are concerning, and maybe some others as well if you put everything together. But as far as the translation, as the translators work, I don't think that we can blame Suika for anything. And she took responsibility for them, which is something that is very good. So I don't know. I don't think... I don't like people attacking them or attacking her or anything like that, because in this case, I don't think she's really, to blame. I think there are other people that should be blamed for this. So nothing, just that. She did it the first time, and let's hope her future translations correct these problems and maybe become more aware. Especially, I can assure you that if one of the novels that I translated was missing a line, I will check every single line of all my future translations for the rest of my life. So definitely let's hope this is a learning experience for her, and that, her translations continue improving from this one. So let's talk about the editor and the proofreader. Suika mentioned in her tweet that there was a huge team behind her, and that the final product is actually very different to the one that she presented in her draft. And this actually doesn't make them look good, because if there was such a huge team, then how didn't they recognize? Especially because she said that the people who are working actually, they love the original novel or something like that, that, that was a labor of love. I think that's what she was trying to say. So I don't understand how they don't find mistakes that other people find them very easily. And again, I think maybe it was the time that these editions, these books, they didn't have enough time to, do the whole process properly. Because again, if it's something that knows the books very well, like the people who are reading, who bought the books and are reading them, I don't understand how they missed certain things. Not even the spelling mistakes, again, get a spell checker, but other things. Again, this line is not just a random line that Wei Wuxian says, at any moment, talking about nothing that, it doesn't affect the story at all. That is a pretty big line to miss. So again, the editor, the proofreader, what's happening there? I don't know. I think here timing was the problem in general. But obviously, when it comes to this, despite the fact of having a whole team working for the editing of the text, the translator is the one whose name appears in front of it. So it often is the translator who takes all the slack. But I think in this case, maybe we should consider, not a different proofreader, but maybe, I don't know, changing something about the method, because evidently it wasn't working. So, would I blame any of these people? I mean, partially, but partially in a very small percentage. I think the ultimate thing to blame is 7Cs. And some of the comments that I've seen about this is a lot of people defending this publishing house, saying something like, I don't know. I read somebody saying that it's because they were so excited about what they're, about the book that they were going to publish, and that's why they wanted to publish it so quickly. And then they, they care about the translation and they care about their fans. And let me call bullshit. I don't know 7Cs. I have no idea about them. But everything that I've seen about the publishing of the books, it doesn't reflect very positively on them, and on them really caring about the quality of what they were doing. And especially, again, as I mentioned before, this is a book that was marketed as something that was supposed to be, better than the fan translation, and done with a lot more care, something that was done by professional. It was a professional edition. And I don't deny it, maybe it is better than the original. But, I mean, just saying that they were so excited about publishing the book, no. What they wanted was to publish the book before Christmas so they could get the whole Christmas craze buy-in before. I had worked for independent publishing houses, and especially those who pride themselves of having quality books and having quality editions. If the translator said, look, I need more time, they're going to give it to them. Because if they care for the quality, they're going to hire professional translators who are going to trust. When they said, if you want the best version, you're going to have to wait a little bit more. Evidently, they didn't give a shit. They probably knew that they give too short time, and they just didn't care. And that is, again, I feel that, how can I put this without sounding like a bitch, although I probably already have. I feel like these companies, they want money. That is what they want. They saw a place in the market that nobody was, utilizing, and they realized that they could fill that place. So that's what they're doing. If they care for the product, they would have waited a lot longer until the translation was there. If they care, and again, I think a lot of people would say, well, Suika is not a professional translator. I feel that she brings something that maybe a professional translator wouldn't bring, which is knowledge specific to the genre. And that is huge, especially when you have this type of genres that are maybe, they have a lot of things that are specific to them that somebody who just have translated other things, maybe they don't know. And that is huge. That is very important, because they probably know in terms of vocabulary what words to translate, what words don't. For example, are you going to translate, I don't know, gaga or arga? Things like that appear, and in subtitles they usually, I think mostly they are translated. Those sort of vocatives or ways to call somebody, you have to decide not to translate, and you have to know that usually they are not translated because it is understood for the specific genre that the readers will understand it. And maybe if you want in the translation, you can add a note saying what it means once, and that's it for people who have never read the book. But that knowledge of specific to the genre is something that is very important. Personally, I wish they have also hired a professional translator to work with Suika to maybe guide her in other aspects of her translation. But obviously that would have been more expensive. And also, I would say that probably, again, I don't want to make accusations, but professional translators, especially professional translators that have a lot of experience, who have worked a lot, and possibly they have work, so they don't need it. Not that they don't need it, but translators who know that if they say no to a job, they will have another one. Those are translators who usually charge more. And especially when you have a combination of languages that there are not as many translators. I don't know if it's the case in this case. I have no idea what's the deal with Chinese and English. I know at least in Spanish, Chinese and Spanish is a combination of languages that is very rare. And actually Chinese translators in Latin America, they get paid more than regular translators who translate more common languages. So I suspect there's also money intent there. But again, I have the feeling that people are viewing these translations like Seven Seas are doing them a favor, when in fact, you're paying them. This is a business. This is a business decision for. I don't doubt that there was people working in this translation, in this edition, that really care about it. That I don't doubt it. I feel like for a lot of people it was a labor of love. But just because of that, you can't be as naive as to think that Seven Seas is just doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They are doing this because of money. So their decisions a lot of the time is going to be based on money because they're a business. They can afford to do otherwise. So if they chose not to give her more money, is because they wanted the books out before Christmas, and that's it. They couldn't give her more money, more time. That is my perspective. I don't know if this is how it happened, but it's the impression that I get, that a lot of this would be solved if Seven Seas maybe will take a little bit more time and focus a little bit more on quality. Like, again, I love the covers. They look beautiful. I really like that they have descriptions, and they have, I think, also like a guide for pronunciation. That is very nice, but maybe also focus in other aspects of the novel as well. So, is people writing complaining? Yes, you should complain. Again, you shouldn't harass the translator, or if you know the editor or the proofreader, you shouldn't harass them as well. But definitely complain to Seven Seas. Not because, again, this is not an attack, but they have to know that this is unacceptable. Especially for the kind of money that you're paying for these translations, for these books. Maybe if you live in a country that has a strong currency, you don't feel it as much. But if you live in a country in Argentina that the currency is basically worthless in comparison to dollars and things like that, these are very expensive books, incredibly expensive, between tax, between delivery, just not knowing whether it's going to be delivered or not. It's a huge mess. And for people who are paying that much money, they absolutely have the right to complain. But complain to Seven Seas, because I feel that the responsibility lies in them. And by complaining, you are showing them that it's unacceptable, that they need a more rigorous editing or more rigorous proofreading, that this is not something that is going to be acceptable for the next books. Again, it was the first edition of a type of book that has never been, at least in English, it has never been published before. So will cut them, at least personally, I will cut them some slack. But I feel like if everybody say, well, it was just a mistake, it's fine, then they're going to probably think the same thing for the next one. They're going to say, well, if we make mistakes, they're just going to think they're fine, like it's not a problem. No, you have to let them know that you know. They also put a Google form where you should inform their mistakes, and to me that sounds a little bit like you're doing the job for them. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just salty. Maybe I'm just a bitch. But what can I say? If you have to complain to them. Tag them in your post, whatever you do. Let them know that the next book, they have to be changes, that things have to be better. They have to know the type of public that this book has. They have to know that there's a lot of people who know the story pretty much by heart. And they're going to notice if they are lines missing, if there are mistranslations, if, things are not... Well, this one is a lot more difficult to change, because if it's the choice of a translator, it's the choice of a translator, of the editor. But again, just show them what you feel. I think they have. This is a problem that, people had been already complaining for a while. So, again, I wouldn't direct any complaints or anything like that to a translator or to, the editor. Again, I don't know who the editor is, but if you know them, then don't direct hate against them. I feel like you direct them to Seven Seas, and then maybe Seven Seas is going to say to the translator, when this is the problems that we have, maybe check better. The next hour is going to tell the editor, maybe work in a different way, find a different method, whatever. But you have to let them know, because when the money that they're charging, especially considering that there are several books to get to the whole story, that is a lot of money. That is more, and that is a lot of money. So yes, if you complain to them, and I think it's deserved. So, am I buying the novel? Not yet, but it has nothing to do with this, and it has absolutely everything to do with me just not being able to use my credit card. That's the only way that I have to buy the book. I have to use my credit card, but I had some things to buy before, some things for my house that I had to buy with some urgency. So in my case, I am not buying the novel yet, but I'm going to buy it eventually. However, if I had the opportunity to buy it, personally, I would wait for the second book. I want to see whether these problems still repeat themselves, not specifically these mistakes, but if people keep finding the same type of mistakes, because if they do, it's evident that they didn't learn anything from what happened to the first one. So I'll check the second one and I'll see, and if I continue seeing mistakes, then I'll probably wait for all of them to be, corrected. And I don't know what they're doing. I think they're correcting the digital edition, and the next editions are going to be correct. Something like that. So I don't know. In my case, with the amount of money that I have to spend in these books, I'll prefer to wait to have the best version possible. But again, let's see what happens in the second edition. Now, why I still think you should buy it? I think, yes, we should buy it, but not because of Seven Seas, not because of the translator. I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't pay the amount of money that I have to pay for these books if it was just a translation. Like, I don't think this translation is worth this amount of money. However, what it is worth, well, there are two reasons why you should still buy it. The first one is obvious. These editions give money to the author. Already, I mean, the author obviously made money in China, and I guess other translations that have been done. I don't know if there are other official translations. I think there are other official translations for other languages, I believe. Maybe wrong. But I feel like these books are such a success that it's unfair that the author of the novel is not getting her, the part that should be hers. So I think just for that is definitely something that we should do. Buying the books is supporting the author. However, there is another reason, and that other reason is the fact that this is going to show this publishing house and maybe others, that this is a type of book that has a market and that has a public that really wants to read them. So hopefully in the future we'll get other books from other authors like Priest, or that is the only other author that I know, but from all of those other stories that we like, then we might get also editions, let's say professional editions, but let's say official editions to read and to support them. So I would say that is why it's important to buy them. Let's show them that there is a market that is interested in those books. And maybe it's also a market that is interested in good translations, but that is besides the point. So I am buying the books eventually when my credit card allows it. But so far I won't. I will continue reading the Exiled Rebels translation, which is again not perfect, but it's fine. It's I can understand it. That's all I ask at this stage. Maybe in the future I'll reread this translation and compare it. So this is all I have to say about this. Again, my conclusion, complain to Seven Seas. I don't like this idea of people being just against complaining, or again, you pay money for this, you deserve to have the best product. And again, don't complain to a translator. I don't think it's something that you should complain to a translator. It's definitely something that you should complain to Seven Seas. They are going to do the next books anyway, so at least in that way they'll know what they should change in the way they work, what is not acceptable, and you will get better translations. That's just it. I don't know about asking for a refund. I don't ever know if in my case would be impossible, because I have to ask for a refund and send the book and then get the book. Now it would be a nightmare. And many people, they don't care. Like other than the maybe two big issues that I talk about, maybe a lot of people, they don't care about the small mistranslations, they don't care about the spelling mistakes, things like that. So I don't know, but do speak up. I think as a consumer, you have the right to speak up for something that you paid for. But beyond that, as a fan, when you were marketed something that was supposed to be something and is not, then you have the right to speak up, to say it. Do it politely, don't attack anybody, but show the publishing house your concerns. Tell them that is something that affects your enjoyment of the book, and that you hope the next books are not like that, because that is the problem. Okay, that is the end. I speak for a very long time. I'm so sorry. This was very long, but I had to get this out of my chest. Anyway, I think this is it. Let's go to the reaction.